Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today I finally get to talk about one of my favorite games of all time, Nier. This is a game that I can't suck the dick of enough. If you've been around the channel for a long time, you know that I've talked about Nier a fucking ton. It is my go-to gold standard when it comes to story-driven games. Originally, Nier came out in 2010, I played it in 2012, and as a result, it changed my life. It made me a stronger, more attractive man, and probably made me taller back then. I know I'm not exactly known for my height now, but imagine if I never played Nier and gained a few extra inches on my height. Nier was a game that, to me, was something I'd never experienced before, and I've still never experienced since. So I'm so happy, just fucking delighted that they decided to remaster the original Nier with Nier Replicant. Nier Replicant just came out, and it is the exact same game as it was in 2010, but completely upgraded. Visually, a combat overhaul, as well as adding new content to it, a whole new ending. It is better than the original. It is such an incredible experience that I can never recommend enough. Nier was never a flawless game. The biggest shit stain on the pristine panties of this product was its gameplay. In 2010, it just had very dated gameplay. It wasn't fun to really play. It was just an incredible story with the best soundtrack in gaming, which is also still true with the remaster here. But with the remaster, they've taken that kind of boring, shitty gameplay and improved it. They've made it a lot better. It's still not like the best gameplay you'll ever play in your life. You're not going to be playing Nier Replicant just because you've fallen in love with the gameplay. It's still very simple, but it's much better than it was. So it takes that and brings it up to a more modern feeling, and I absolutely appreciate that. It is a lot more fun to play, though I still wouldn't really say the gameplay is anything all that special. It's very surface level stuff. You get a decent selection of weapons, but they all kind of function the same way. You put words on them to improve some very basic stuff on them, and you can pretty much just choose one weapon and use that for the entire playthrough of the game, because normal difficulty is way too easy, and hard difficulty is still easy. It's just everything is a massive fucking health sponge. I streamed the whole thing, and one of the boss fights on hard took me 20 minutes of pure DPS, never missing a single DPS phase or anything, to finally kill it. Hard is just a massive health pool, so that's the only difference between the difficulties, but in both cases you can pretty much just pick one weapon and get through the game pretty easily. You're never really switching weapons out, so the gameplay, again, isn't like the best, but it's much better than it was, and it's still fun. It's still flashy, and there's just nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of basic. So if you're coming into Nier Replicant with the expectation that the gameplay is going to blow your little asshole out or something, it's just not going to happen. But what you are going to get is an incredible story with the best soundtrack in video games. I've said it since I beat it initially, and beat every ending, of course, in 2012. I've said it since then, and I'm saying it again now. Nier has the best soundtrack of any game ever made, period. The only thing that comes close is like Nier Automata. Like, Nier is on a whole nother level when it comes to OST. And in Nier Replicant, they have revamped the soundtrack, keeping most things intact, but just making it sound much cleaner. And a lot of people were a bit disappointed by that. I wasn't one of those people. When you play them side by side, the original versus the Replicant counterpart, there are noticeable differences. It sounds much cleaner in Replicant, but some of the songs are a bit different with their composition. Not that I'm really let down by it, because it's still absolutely incredible in the Replicant edition versus the original. The original does have that kind of like muffled kind of charm to it, but I definitely think that they're pretty much the same, only like a few small differences between them, not enough to be disappointed by. It is still the best soundtrack in all of video gaming. And now what matters the most and what I really want to focus on is the story of Nier. Nier Replicant adds some more content to it, which I'll get into in a minute, but I want to focus on the actual core story of Nier. It is unlike anything you will ever experience in video games, I assure you of that. This is a story that is not afraid to be dark. It's a story of just absolute hopelessness around every corner. It's a story that is just so incredibly fucking sad. It punches you in the nutsack and then keeps punching you in the nutsack, and then once you finish all of the endings, it rips your entire nutsack off. And if you're playing this without a nutsack, it's gonna slap its nutsack on your face. This shit is absolutely wild. It is so grim, sad, and moving. It's done beautifully. It's a story of just pure tragedy across the board. When you think you're getting to something with a little hope in there, bang! Yokotaro comes in and he slaps that thought right out of your fucking head in the next cutscene. Like, it is on a whole nother level. Most games pull their punches or they're just too afraid to go where Nier goes, but this, it goes in there full throttle. It does not slow down. It is more than happy to deliver such an incredibly sad, albeit beautiful narrative, filled with interesting characters that you can't help but feel for. Now, I mentioned there's multiple endings to this game, but that's not exactly accurate. They're not just endings. Like, Route B is a completely different experience. So Route A is what you're going to play through the first time around, and you're going to be moved by it, I'm sure. But Route B is where this game truly shines, and there is nothing like Route B in anything else out there. That's for goddamn sure. Route B picks up right after you beat the game. You reload your save, and then you start the game from the halfway point, and the game is completely different. Everything that happens in Route A affects Route B and your experience in the game. So Route B turns the entire narrative on its fucking head, puts it asshole to God, and it is a completely different ballgame that will absolutely make you very, very sad at a lot of points. Everything it does with its story is done masterfully. It's a genius narrative, really. But I will say, the dialogue is a bit corny. And by a bit, I mean it's really corny. If you've watched anime, you know sometimes when they over-explain things or they really beat something into you, that happens a lot. And I feel like for a lot of people that takes away from just how impactful the actual story elements are, like the beats of what's going on. Like, you'll have this incredibly brutal scene, someone very important to you, someone that you've been growing with throughout the course of 2 playthroughs now has just perished, and it's a really bloody, terrible scene, and then the dialogue will kick in, and they're like, how could this happen to such a good person? They were such a good person because of this, and they were still such a good person up until the moment they died. And it's like, oh, this is a really powerful moment, but the dialogue kind of reels it back, and it's like, oof, And I don't know how much of that is just translation, which I think is a big part of it. I play the dub because it's nostalgic to just play it the original way I played it in 2012. But it is something worth noting that for some people, I have no doubt that kind of dialogue is going to take you out of just how powerful those moments are. And it's a shame. It doesn't do it for me personally, because it's easy to just look past that. It's like, you know what? They're over-explaining things and really driving this in. But so what? It doesn't really take me away from it. But I know for some people, in the chat, they were like, okay, that's a bit much. They don't need to keep saying that. And I do get it, but I think it's easily overlooked if you can just, move past that and understand that, yeah, it's going to be over-explained sometimes. No game has the balls to do what this game does. It is such an incredible adventure, a narrative masterpiece. This game is just truly special in everything that it does with its narrative, its universe, its world, and this is a really big world. There's a few games that come before this that tie directly into this called the Drakengard series. I personally am not overly familiar with the Drakengard series, only what relates to Nier, but you don't need to have that understanding going into this game. It pretty much feeds you what you need to know about the world, which is good enough. And then if you've played Automata, which I imagine a lot of you that are watching this have, because Nier Automata was a massive success that I couldn't be happier for, because Yokotaro really deserved to have such a huge smash hit. Most of you have probably played that. It doesn't really tie into Nier here. This takes place thousands of years before Automata, but you will recognize some things in this game from Automata. It comes way before it, but they do exist in the same universe. So I just want to let you all know there's a lot in this universe, and it's so wonderfully constructed. Now, I'd like to get to a couple more things, because, again, the game's not flawless. There is a lot of dated game design that's still here in Replicant because they wanted to stay true to the original, and that comes in the form of text-based adventures. There is one section in particular that is 45 minutes of only reading. So there are times in this game where they're not showing you anything, they're just putting words on the screen and you're reading a story. It happens in one location, even in the initial playthrough, where you're solving riddles and reading short stories, and then it happens again a bit later where it is 45 minutes of uninterrupted reading to explain to you a character. It's well written, they're not poorly written or anything, but it's not exactly a great gameplay design, especially when the game is typically a very high action, fast paced kind of gameplay. So it's just something that I thought I'd mention that just doesn't really translate super well to a modern game. The game is constantly changing genres throughout, which I think is great, keeping it fresh. But when it gets to the tech stuff, you can really see a bit of datedness to it. And the side quests are pretty bad. Almost all of them are like fetch quests. There are some exceptions, of course, but for the most part, they're fetch quests. Kill these things, get these things, bring them back, and that's about it. You get gold for it. So the side quests aren't very interesting, but that's not the biggest deal in the world. It's just, it is a product of 2010. So these kind of things you can't really completely change in an upgrade to the game. But what they have done is they've added a lot of new stuff as well, not just the combat overhaul. They added an entire new route, Route E, that is completely new to Replicant, and it's really, really good. It adds a lot to the experience, and I'm trying my best not to spoil anything about this game, but you will get to play as a new character, you get to go through a new thing, and it's really great. They also add a new section that wasn't in the original Nier, where you go to a ship and you learn about a new shade, and they did add some new content to it. This is a much better version of the original Nier. I really think it's just a genuine improvement in every department. Even soundtrack, I actually preferred the newer soundtrack to the older one, but maybe it's because I haven't heard the older one in a while. But either way, they're pretty much fucking identical. You can't go wrong with original Nier or Nier Replicant soundtrack. It's still the fucking best there is. I just genuinely think Nier Replicant is a pure upgrade in all the fields of the original Nier. So plugging Nier Replicant in the Moist Meter, I'm giving it a 90%. It's been over a decade since the original Nier came out, and still nothing has even come close to its narrative masterpiece. It is unlike any game you have ever played before, and I always recommend this game to anyone who likes story-driven games, because this does it better than anything I've seen. No game goes where Nier has gone, tackles some very heavy themes, very good characters, very, very, very good writing with its story. I just can't praise this game enough. I always recommend this, and I'm still recommending it. Nier Replicant is fantastic. That's about it. So yeah.